Forgive me, I'm really enjoying that title. And yes, this is following up on our previous video. And as you can see in our previous video, we took a couple of frames out of our slightly disorganized nook here that are super frames and have honey in. And this is where they went. So this is the next door hive. And you can see it's a double layer. So the painted brown layer is the super. So the super is where honey for harvesting goes. And this hive is really enjoying the good nectar flow. We've got a good population of bees early, and as we found out when we had a look, they've put loads of honey in since the last week. And the first good sign when you put a super on is there being a decent number of bees up and active in it. Sometimes you'll put a super on thinking that the bees are ready for it, and the next week you come back and it's totally empty. The bees are ignoring it because you've just got that wrong, and the bees don't need a super yet. You can encourage them sometimes by putting a frame with honey in, just to give them the idea, and they can be interested in that. But bees will be bees is a little bit of a motto that we have. We make our plans, and those plans are not necessarily shared by the bees. You try and get them to listen to the briefing, but they're very bad listeners. And so much like in the brood nest, they do tend to work from the middle-ish, sometimes a little offset, and work out. So the outermost ones will have the least on, and then as you work towards the middle you'll get more. So there's me holding up some nice fresh nectar that you can just about see, particularly if you go full screen. And then as you see, as we work into the centre, the amount of honey will get better and better. So in the normal course of an inspection, we wouldn't actually need to go through every frame like this. Kate and I are only doing it today because we were just so excited at how much honey had gone on in that week. We are not accustomed to a strong nectar flow in April in our area, and so we went through and had a good old look, really just for our own enjoyment. In the normal bee inspection, you would have a visual look down the top of the super, assess it by the weight, lift it off, and all the business needs to be done in the brood nest. The super doesn't need to be inspected every time. So on this next frame, you start to see that they've not just filled it with nectar, but on the other side there, they've actually evaporated off as much water as needs to be, and they're starting to cap, and then the little area I'm pointing to there is in the process of capping. And so once it's capped, they've evaporated it down to 19% water, and so that nectar wouldn't ferment and will keep. So the bees do that for their own purposes. They're looking to lay in stores to last them all of a winter. But that's what makes honey honey, is that it will keep, and that's the value that ancient people recognised in it. The Egyptians were very, very interested in bees for its lasting properties. The lasting properties of honey was of significance to them, being interested in eternity as they were. Quite a few bee products are said to have been involved in mummification, and yes, and so once it's evaporated down to that level, you can put it in a jar, and as long as it remains airtight, that should keep indefinitely. Now in the UK we do have to put a sell-by date of 2 years from the date that we check its water content, which always annoys me slightly, but that's the regulations and we have to follow them. If you ever have honey which has got too much water in it, it will ferment, and so we do have, we test our honey before jarring with the refractometer as well. We don't just trust the bees with it, because sometimes mistakes can be made. Sometimes also honey will absorb moisture from the air, so if it's not kept airtight, the moisture content, the water content will go up. And so I do have a store of second grade honey, which traditionally is called baker's honey, which is honey that is in the process of fermenting. You can cook with it, it won't be unhealthy for you, but my intention is actually to make mead. We've researched what the certification for producing alcoholic beverages for sale in this country is, and it's not as onerous as we feared. And so in the future, mead takes a little while to be made. It's about a year's processing and maturing before it's really drinkable. So it won't be a product on our website in 2017, but mead is something I intend to produce. Obviously, one of the other things with anything like that is I want it to be of a high quality, and so an awful lot of research and possibly an amount of trial and error is going to have to be done before we're able to produce something that I would be satisfied to put my name on. So there's the super off, and Kate is holding the queen excluder. One of the things that we always do is we check that the queen isn't on it. It has never happened to us, but it is a gag that beekeepers will share with each other that you must always check, because the queen could be on that, and then we could put that queen excluder to one side, and when we put it back when we're closing up, we may accidentally leave the queen on the wrong side of it, and that is a bit of a disaster. So that is a beekeeping discipline that we do every time we inspect, even though it's never happened to us. But one day it might, and we will be glad that we are fastidious about that. And so, as you may notice, I left one frame there uninspected, and that's because we know and can look visually and see that there's nothing going on those first frames. So take the frame out. The frame that we took out there is just to give us room to work. If you try and lift a frame that is wedged in between two other frames, the gap, the bee space between them, is enough for a bee to fit in, but if you wobble even a little bit from one side to the other, you're in danger of crushing or rolling the bees, which is really, really bad. It's bad for your worker bees. Of course, you really don't want to do that to your queen, and you'll see there's that little bit of care as we're lifting them up and lifting them, putting them back in, to not move side by side, and trying not to touch the ends either, because the queen isn't always on the honeycomb. Sometimes she's on the inside edge of the hive, and you just don't want to roll that. And as we speak of queens, on this next frame we'll have another queen cup, and a really good look at it. I'll hold it up to the camera in a moment. So a queen cup is built out proud of the honeycomb, and the bees do this. Here it comes. You can see it there on the edge of the comb, and as you can see, it points downwards. Now that is a queen cup. There is no queen egg in there, and when they put an egg in there, they will surround it with royal jelly, the consumption of which makes the difference between an egg growing up to be a worker or a queen, and then they will make it much, much longer. It's about half the length of your little finger. If it is going to be a good queen, you do want your queen cells, as they are once they're occupied, to be really big. The bigger the better, in my opinion. And that is when they're going to either swarm or supersede, replace their old queen. But it's really important not to just sort of hit the panic button immediately when you see queen cells. You must think carefully about what your objectives are. Sometimes you may well want to let them do it, particularly if it's supersedure, if the old queen is getting towards the end of her life. Knocking off queen cells wherever you see them, which I do when I work with some other beekeepers. I get a little exasperated about how reflexively they knock off queen cells the moment they see them in queen cups. If they need to replace the queen, then that queen cell, that queen cup, is going to be valuable to them. However, there is also such a thing as a play cup. They do just seem to sometimes make cups for no reason that human beings can work out. Certainly not this human being. I would be glad to hear your suggestions, or if you do actually know, it would help me sleep at night, knowing why on earth they made queen cups. But yes, we tend to leave them, because you just come back the next week and they've made another one. So here I am holding up the queen and doing that terrible sin of pointing to her, which I never quite worked out why beekeepers say don't point at the queen, but I only ever do it for the video, and also when showing other people beekeeping. So actually I do point at the queen, and I shouldn't, but I don't know why I shouldn't. You've probably gathered from the videos so far, the way that I talk about beekeeping in general, is that actually there are a big variety of opinions about how best to beekeep, And so yes, I am often quite careful to just say this is what we do. It isn't necessarily definitively the best thing to do. Something I learned very early when I was learning beekeeping is if you have two beekeepers in a room, you'll probably have three opinions to choose from. And so, as we come to the end of the brood nest, and the remaining frames are just stored honey, I hope that you've enjoyed the video today. We have a third video from this day of inspections that will be posted up in a couple of days' time. I really hope that you've enjoyed our video today and found it interesting. Please do comment, any criticisms, any questions, always enjoy that. And subscribe so as not to miss our next video. And do also take a look at the links in the doobly-doo to our website and our Facebook page. I thank you very much for watching and see you next time.